Got the film. This is all a system of control. And one thing, do not forget this, but I mentioned this before when you had about the high percentage of whites in the South that did not have slaves. It's to control everybody. To keep a narrow group on top. So racism would use not just to horrifically, in this context, to control people who were slaves, those people have this more and more of darker skin, but also of whites, poor whites. But one of the first one, a method of control, is just this. Remember, slavery or racism is not just prejudice, but it's using economic law, but also social norms. And names and how they treat people is really an insidious method of control, because then it becomes normal, it becomes natural, and people just like assume it's always been that way. And names are a big way. And names for a group. And the idea would be, in this context, whites don't have this name, but the others do have a name just for them. It has nothing to do with what they did or said or felt or anything. It's just who they are. And so one of the more common names, it is very racist, but it's gone out of, people just don't know it anymore. So it's gone out of use. It's called a cuffie. You ever heard a cuff? It's giving someone the back of their hand. And a cuffie is a subservient slave. A slave that has accepted that they are inferior. And that's the key point. They've accepted that they are inferior. So they, yes sir, no sir. They do what they say. They act dumb. They act totally subservient. The idea is that the spirit has been cuffed out of them, and they've now accepted the proper and natural order. And so a cuffie would be to say somebody, I mean, that's like an insult, like you are nothing but a dog. You've been beaten, you've been broken. And that is a really racist thing. Another term for almost the exact same thing would be a sample. A sample is a mocking term that just another dumb person who they act like they're supposed to, they act dumb, they act subservient because they're supposed to be. It's a really racist term. But the thing about white passive resistance is, technically this would have been what they called a cuffie. With the master's child. That's from the 1850s in South Carolina. I don't know the exact date. But wouldn't that, if you want to resist, how would you resist? Would you act like they want you to act? And that's the first step of passive resistance. Act how they want you to act. And then you can do other stuff. If you act dumb and act obedient, they might not pay attention to you. But let me show you a cartoon how this works. Here is it's unbelievable, but this is meant to be ha-ha, funny. And this is actually from the 1890s. And I should add, the most racist time in history of the United States would be about 1880 to about the 1950s, after slavery. If racism is a method of control and keep one group on top, don't you need more control if they're now free? So this cartoon, it's a pretty startling one. I couldn't make it much bigger than this because I started getting pixelated. Something's happened. Yeah.
What changed in the 50s?
Well, up into the 60s, but it's a civil rights movement. Why isn't this? Okay. Not sure what I did. Still pretty racist, you know. Still a lot more racist than I think. Okay, so this is him saying, using a lot of horrific racial caricatures. Say, Sambo, don't you think this piece of watermelon is rather large? And then it's not speaking, with an accent, but not saying full words. Golly, boss, that ain't half big enough. So mocking them, laughing at them. Look how they draw him. So really black, kind of a round face. So it's meant to be not quite human. I mean, this is, but it's supposed to be also for whites to go, aha. But think about what this does for control. No matter who you are, if you're white, you're that person. And what does it say to people who are not white? And pretty soon, if you're taught that, even laugh, mock that, it's like you start to believe and accept it, which is pretty scary, but that's or it's, I can't ever fight my way out of this. And so the thing about control is, this is where you get these racial slurs are a method of control. It controls. And it not just controls the person who's being racially attacked, but also, like I mentioned before, poor whites, you could always say, hey, you're not one of them, you're closer to me, so don't fight the system we're in, or you might lose what you have. So this is a classic example of one, but this is actually, well, racial science was brand new in this era. When they started actually coming up with races, one of the first racial scientists, well, there's a whole series of work about 1880s, 1890s, had it for 37 different races, including that race. That is a caricature of Irish. And Irish was an insult. And look at him. Look how he's drawn. Quasi drunkard, a crazy revolutionary, going to blow things up, and he's dumb because he has a torch sitting on a barrel of gunpowder. So then other people could say, hey, I'm not Irish.
He doesn't look very human.
Exactly. You know, I don't know.
A drumstick?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be a drumstick.
Really big cigar.
But I'm not sure. That one, I don't understand the reference there. Had to be some reference for New York City in the 1860s. But, so when we talk about racial slurs, think about them in terms of what control is and how this is saying you are subservient, you've accepted, or you're going to be made to accept it. And that's where you come right up to, this is meant to be funny, but considered one of the worst racial slurs. And look at that. It's an ad for a bank, and it's meant to be kind of funny. And what it was is, it's one of those banks you could wind up, and you put it's metal, and you put the coin on the hand, and it would kind of, the arm would move and put it in the mouth, and that'd be the bank. And I've seen banks like this. The ones I saw was literally, you know, another animal doing it. But here, look how they draw. And this, for whites, aha, but this is the subservient. And these words come out of slavery and their methods of control. And this is the word that has stuck the longest. And that is why this one is also, especially for people who are white, this is a incredibly racist statement because it harkens back to slavery and what that really meant, the roots of racism. So that's why I showed you this. I'll come back to this again, but, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. But with control, that gets to resistance. You act like that. And then fight back. You act subservient. Yes, sir, no, sir, and then break stuff. Think about a plantation with all these field hands. With the quota system, they're not really watching that close. You got to figure out a way to make it work. And so, screw things up, break things. Oh, sure, you're risking a beating, but remember, slaves are supposed to be dumb. So, make mistakes and then act stupid. I had no idea you weren't supposed to put all four shoes on one hoof of the horse. Nobody told me this. I had no idea. And then how easy it would be to sabotage a plow or dump all the seeds in the creek. I didn't know. I just thought you were supposed to do that. Nobody told me not to urinate in the soup. I did not know. Oh, sure, you're going to get beaten a little bit, but it's always a fine line, isn't it? If they're supposed to be dumb, aren't they going to make mistakes? Also, what if they made a legitimate mistake and you beat them and they really do something bad, like worse than urinate in the soup? Which, by the way, wouldn't you want to do that? If you're a slave, not just like if you see soup. And by the way, anybody who said yes, please let me know if you work it out for yourself. But break stuff. Oh, I should add. This is why slavery doesn't work in factories. Slave labor does not work in factories at all. Think about all the moving parts in a factory. How easy it would be to sabotage a factory with all that machinery that's hard to see. You can blow everything up. Or if you're making products, that you can't really look at and see if there's a problem with it until it breaks down. Think how complex a car would be and how easy it would be to sabotage a car, and you would never know. Even if you are mechanically inclined to know, you still don't know until it happens, because you can hide it. The Germans, Nazi Germany, well, they did the same thing in World War I, but not as many, would take millions of people, mostly your age and older, slave laborers from France or Ukraine or Poland or wherever, all the areas they conquered in Europe in World War II, and brought them back to Germany as slave laborers, sometimes as household help, but mostly in factories. And what would the slaves do? Yeah, they'd break stuff. They would purposely sabotage what they were making. They're risking a horrible death, literally. But that's the way to fight back. German equipment, their tanks and their planes in World War II, they were notorious for being unreliable. And partially because they over-engineered them, but the biggest reason were slave laborers fought back. And that's what they do. So it wasn't just, a lot of people think it was just what they would do, especially after 42 with Jews or other, what they call people they were undesirables. No, they just did it. They just did it.
That happened to a lot of bombs, and that's why they wouldn't explode on impact.
Or their tanks, you could hear a tank squeal a mile away because they wouldn't put the ball bearings in. They couldn't tell, so you have metal rubbing against metal. Hey, they helped win the war and risked everything. People say, oh, why don't slaves resist? No, they resist all the time. It's easy to say, hey, I would resist. I'd be tough if I were a slave. Well, you don't have a gun to your head. You know, most people don't. So you don't know what it'd be like. They do fight back. But you're right about the bombs. German bombs were so unreliable. No, they helped win the war. So that, another way to fight back would be through the use of spirituals and religion. So one of the civilizing factors was, especially after a couple generations, Christianity. The idea was mostly Protestant religion, and they would allow for lay ministers, so they're not officially ordained, but they would be slaves or former slaves. But spirituals is just one example. Religion could be used as a way of resistance. In a prayer meeting, as I recall, but think about like a church service, that's a place where slaves could come together. They could actually come together and they could talk and pass things on and talk about resistance or running away. But think about the spirituals. Songs that slaves would sing would have really important hidden meanings that would be used not only to fight back, but also to show that, you know, the masters think they're so smart, but they're too dumb to figure out what we're really saying. And so here is a great one. And I love this one because there's a lot of great spirituals, but it's not the religious element. This is a massive fighting back song. What are they stealing?
Freedom.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, themselves. They're stealing themselves the freedom. You think I'm property, I'm going to steal myself. And that's one. They're telling the slave, you know, they're telling them this is wrong and I'm going to get away someday. So the spirituals, I think, are always pretty, just an incredibly important way to realize how they would fight back. Another one, I didn't put it up there, but just write down runaway. Runaway is another big one. Hey, if you're property and you're the machine for them, take away your labor. The problem is, you know you're going to get beat. Remember that collar I showed you with the prongs, I think on Friday?
Yeah.
All those, you know, they would put on for runaway. They know they're going to be tortured, but get away. I thought they were coming for me. Okay, with that. So this is actually early in the century. But look, by 1852, that's about $100,000 today. That's the reward. So they know they were worth a lot of money. So they might just hide for a day. They know they're going to get beaten, but I fought back for a day. That's why the issue about Texas and Florida. Because remember, Jackson invaded Florida partially to stop runaway slaves. That's why it's such a big deal. This is real money they're going to lose. That's when they would give so much to return those runaway slaves. And what was the most famous route? Safe houses, people helping to usually get to the water where they can get on a boat and escape. What was that route called? Yeah, the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad usually following waterways, so you see them either along the mountains or try to get on a steamboat or a boat like in Savannah and smuggle north. And the people who would help them and guide them, they were informally known as conductors. And this is, risking their life, because there would be slave hunters and slave patrols. Here's one using dogs to hunt down a runaway slave. Oh yeah, they beat you up. They sometimes would also just kill them. But most of the time they wanted the big money for those runaways. So they have these slave hunting patrols. And you can imagine how they felt about these so-called conductors. That's taking money out of their pocket. So anybody who was trying to help runaway slaves was risking getting lynched, without a doubt. And Henry Brown supposedly shipped himself in a 4x3 box. He shipped himself from Atlanta to Boston. And so he put it up in a box and mailed himself. And I love that picture. Because look at him, he supposedly opened up and he pops out. He's in a suit. If you were in a box for 3.5 weeks, 4x3, how would you pop out of a box? Yeah! But like, I'm here! So, by the way, did anyone learn about the Underground Railroad in elementary school? And was anybody disappointed when you found out there wasn't like a bunch of underground tunnels and trains going through? That's what I thought. I was so disappointed when two of the most famous conductors, women a lot of times were conductors because men underestimated them because of sexism, and so they could play on the stupidity that way of men, but also women have a courage that men don't have. We should add, let's jump right to this. Sojourner Truth was one of the most famous. She was more of a conductor in the North. She got involved in a few of the really pretty out there religious cults in the burned over district, but she'd be helpful for helping runaways get north of the Ohio up into Canada. And the most famous conductor was Harriet Tubman. And a lot of it was deserving. We don't know a lot about Tubman, not because she was really famous, but in 1869, there was a biography that was written about her that was really famous, but half of it wasn't true. It made up all these myths about her, and some made her seem even more impressive. You really have to make that up. But it's hard to know now, and there's a movie that just came out about her, Harriet. I've not seen it. Has anyone seen it? Did you like it? I heard it's well done. I heard there's little inaccuracies, but partially because we're not 100% sure, but whatever. I heard it's good. Should we go right now to a matinee?
Yeah.
I haven't done that in a long time. Yes?
So where did Harriet Tubman go?
She went into the South. 13 times she led people out. And each time she had a target on her head. And during the Civil War, she was a spy for the Union Army. She was involved in 2 raids in the South, cavalry raids. Now, this picture is simply not true. I like it. I just think it's kind of a cool picture, except for one simple thing. No, she never carried a rifle. A rifle would be, she carried a pistol, but not a rifle. Made a big deal about it. I didn't need a rifle, she said. But everyone had her with a rifle. I guess, is it a big deal? Yes, no. And here is from Runaway, a reward. And some are runaways, some are people who help. But Minty, age 27, is of a chestnut color, so that's skin color. Fine looking and about 5 feet tall. That's her. Minty was her name before she ran away. So I thought that was pretty cool. I found that. Would you recommend watching the movie? Well, should we all go? Matinee? Tomorrow? We could all do that. But it's rated R, isn't it?
How did you know that Minty was?
It just knows that's her thing. That one we know is true. So, the other thing is slave rebellions. And there's nothing more horrible than a slave rebellion. Because think about the 2 different ways to look at it. First off, the slaves know if we rebel and are caught, they will torture us to death. You think how they torture them for even relatively minor things. You think they're not going to torture them to death as an example for a slave rebellion? They all know what they're going to get. So there's no prisoners. And the masters, they know how bad they treat the slaves, and the slaves' desire for revenge. They know in their heart how bad it is. So there's nothing more bloody, nothing more awful than a slave rebellion. And so this was the fear, but the thing was, because there was always a lower percentage of slaves to free people in the US, there weren't many slave rebellions. Remember, South Carolina had 57% slaves? That was the highest. So there's still a significant population of people that they pull from for the militia to put them down. Where's the only successful slave rebellion, even though it had a lot of issues? Haiti. There would be here there was actually a slave kingdom for a while in Brazil. There's elements of this still exist. Same thing in Honduras and Belize. And a lot of former slaves would become pirates, and all of these coves along here. The Seminoles for a while was almost like a refuge for slaves. But don't forget, not many in America because of the numbers. There's a lot of rebellions. We're just going to talk about a few in here real quick. And New Orleans was one of the bloodiest slave rebellions in American history. Louisiana had just become a state, and field hands in sugar plantations, basically kind of northwest of New Orleans, up here, they began to rebel. What they did is, they knew they couldn't leave anybody alive at their home plantation, any of the whites in their families, because they would tell. And so they went from plantation to plantation, gathering recruits and killing everybody there. But who told on them? Household slaves from the first house. The militia ran them down here and butchered them. This is a really kind of sad lithograph of it. It says, on to New Orleans, the Negro insurrection, and you see it. When Louisiana became part of the United States, and slaves heard about this new place called the United States that was based upon liberty, they really believed that the United States would come help them. They're carrying American flags. No. And that makes it even more tragic. And to set an example, over 200 of these people were fighting for their freedom. When they were captured, they were summarily executed, and their heads were put on pikes along the path of where they went. And they were there for years, rotting on these pikes. So a pike, just imagine a long spear, and they just jammed into the ground. And so there's a memorial for this, and I heard it was good, really well done, and I knew they didn't pull any punches. So I'm going to show you a picture, and you can probably guess where this is going. I like the fact they don't sugarcoat it. This is what happened for people fighting for freedom in our own country. And I thought that was really well done. It's long. There's a little kind of an inlet in the Mississippi River. It used to be right there, but it's meandered and moved, so the Mississippi's like a half mile away now. But has anyone been to New Orleans? Okay, after the movie Harriet, then we'll quick jump on a bus and go to New Orleans. But New Orleans is awesome. If you ever get a chance, there's so many amazing things there, but that's one of them. So back to this. Denmark Vesey, Denmark Vesey would be a freed black. He was a lay preacher, lay minister. He was accused of trying to start a slave rebellion. Household slaves in the governor's own house in Charleston. Turn it off. You got kind of used to no light.
It's done.
Is it flickering?
It's out.
Is that better?
Yeah.
How about this? Is that good?
Where did that Betsy live?
Charleston, South Carolina. The governor of South Carolina, his household slave, supposedly told. But the thing is, he was free, supposedly going to inside one. To this day, we don't know if this was actually true. He could have been a scapegoat. They were looking for a villain to start cracking down because of fear of rebellion, and they just picked on a free man. But that was the norm. He was a free man, but he was black. So, perfect target. Well, slaves sometimes either they could buy their own freedom. Yeah, they could buy their own freedom. They could be freed. It's called manumission. So you could be freed by the owners. Like George Washington, when he died, actually left in his will after his wife died. most of their slaves would be freed. You notice he waves off there, his wife died, but.
So if they find like a freed slave, what if they think it's like a runaway?
That was actually an issue, we'll come back to that. They had to have some kind of paperwork, but eventually it'd be required.
You said most, so what happened to the rest that were not free?
Oh, some were left with family members. They went to nieces and nephews. And the most famous though, 1831 Nat Turner. This rebellion would have such impact on the South because it's right when the abolitionist movement, literally right when it was beginning. Remember I told you how abolitionists were the villains to the good, positive good theory? Nat Turner was a slave. Like many slaves, you know how to read and write. And he could do some math too. Slaves would be taught to do this so they could do more work. I remember in elementary school, I was always told, maybe some of you were too, that slaves weren't allowed to read and write. That actually is not true. After this, there'd be restrictions, but they could do more work if they could read and write and do math. But here he is talking to other slaves. He too was a lay preacher. And he took his views of what he read in the Bible, but also what he'd heard from more than anything else, just stories told about Africa, because he was a third generation. And they decided we have no choice but to rebel, and we know what rebellion means. So it started on his plantation, and this is from the Richmond Whig, and it's a plate. They call these pictures a plate, because they would draw them on a plate so they could stamp them on the printing press. And here it is showing, in very stylized term, they killed everybody in that house, and then moved from plantation to plantation, because they know if they don't, they'll come after them. And his plan was plantation after plantation, create kind of an army and get to the mountains. Well, here's the ending. The militia came and ran them down. Who told on? Household slaves in the second house they went to.
How did they do that?
You know, looking.
Try not to get caught themselves.
Part of it, you know, we don't want to get blamed for it, but also they think they might get better treatment, or that little racial element, I'm better than them. You know, those grubby field hands do it, I'm in the house. All those things tie together. You get this a horrific situation. Yeah.
Did they get treated better?
What town was this in?
Just it's a little bit west of Richmond, Virginia. South Edmond County is a little bit further west before you get to the Shenandoahs. And by the way, I know, tragical. I know. Did you realize what that important? Yeah. They killed about 55 whites and over 200 slaves. And Nat Turner was actually arrested along with 30 others. And Turner, they would all get a trial and they would all be condemned. But think about it, weren't they property? Why would you have to try them? So it kind of shows the whole farcical nature of this whole thing. And it was to show a trial, he would be executed. And that would lead to Nat Turner laws. And Nat Turner laws were very strengthened slave codes. And here's the thing about it then. The thought was, okay, we have to crack down on slaves getting together and talking. So all blacks in the South had to wear a tag. They called them slave tags. And these are the three up above, those are tags. And they're pretty horrible. And they had to wear this tag. And free blacks had to, the idea being if they don't have it, they're a slave. So they're always checking. They don't have it, they could be severely beaten. Or if they're free, put into slavery. They could be sold. It limited education, also assembling. No more than 4 slaves could ever assemble together. But that was, everyone knew what that meant, no more than 4 blacks. Because they didn't want free blacks assembling. Or for that matter, whites and blacks assembling, because whites might be contributing to this. They strengthened the militia. That would be kind of the big deal in the Civil War, don't you think? They censored the mail to keep abolitionist material out. That's federal government. And Congress passed a gag rule. And that gag rule said no talk. For 10 years, they had this rule. Nobody in Congress can mention slavery. That's the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. They could not talk about slavery. That should give you an idea how much this shook the country. So they talk about all those things about Texas and the issues about slave rebellion. That's what they feared. And it's no coincidence. This is just 1 year after.
How many years could they not talk about slavery?
10 years. This is just 1 year before, I'm sorry, the tariff issue. Yeah, they couldn't even mention the word slavery, which seems amazing in the U.S. House and the Senate. But, yeah.
What was the one about militia?
They strengthened it, made it stronger.
Wouldn't it be hard to be in Congress and not talk about slavery?
Yeah. So they find all kinds of ways to get around it. It's no coincidence that the abolitionism became mainstream in the North in 1831. Now, it was always a small part of the population, never more than 5 or 6% of the northern population. But a couple things about it. First off, in 1831, William Lloyd Garrison, that's him a little bit older, but in 1831, he started the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. In fact, that's what Southerners said. The Liberator got in the hands of Nat Turner. He would have been perfectly happy. And before you write down Douglas, abolitionists believed slavery was immoral, period. Yeah. William Lloyd. But a lot of abolitionists did not believe in equality. They wanted to free the slaves and then get rid of them. They still wanted a white republic. So there was a lot of this element here of this, yes, slavery is wrong, but they're not equal. Garrison was unusual. I didn't quite finish. So, if we live left to finish tomorrow, we'll go from there.
So for tomorrow, I just have to get the notes.
Yep.